Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Shares, proudly powered by leadershipbydesign.co, where we aim to add value to people's lives. You can listen to us every Wednesday and Thursday at lunchtime on ebizradio.com, where we talk about everything leadership, coaching, and marketing. And you can listen to the Lunchtime Shares on all your major podcast channels today, guys. Joining me and back with us on the leadership segment, we have the human and talent-centered strategist, executive coach, agile people advocate, and HR and leadership expert, Anja van Beek. Anja, welcome back to the Lunchtime Shares, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, good afternoon, Kevin. Thank you for the invite. I must say, this is always a highlight in my calendar, knowing that the two of us will have a chat about something important, linking and supporting the listeners, to see how we can show up as better leaders and humans and fathers and mothers and friends in the life.
Absolutely. I think, and I've already got, I've got a few people that appear on the show often. And I get people saying to me, "Oh, I love it when you speak." Like Leonie's one of the conversations people just love. They're like, "Oh, I just love it when you and Leonie talk." And the other one is you and Anja. It's like, "Oh, I love Anja's conversations." And it is. It's such an honor for you to be on the show, and I love that you make time for us, because we do have really, really wonderful conversations. And today's conversation is all about leadership, the importance of leadership, the importance of why we need it, the importance of it's not a thing for those people with titles. I honestly believe leaders is a skill, and everyone can cultivate leadership within themselves. And it's not the person with the title, but it's a skill that you can actually learn. And the other sort of way that I break up leadership very often when speaking to executives is leaders create leaders. That's it, right? And there's more to that, but in simplicity, in simplistic form, you kind of go, okay, cool. That's what a leader really does. He empowers, he delegates, he mentors, he coaches, he guides, he creates a vision, and he gets everyone who's around him to become leaders in that capacity in whatever they do, and really do that, really well. Do you think that's a good summary of what you think leadership is as well? What is it for you?
Yeah, you said it so well, and I will build on what you've mentioned. So when you shared your understanding of leadership, you know what, the one thing that comes to mind for me is when I think of leadership, I think of influence and how we influence and empower the people around us. And I think that's a critical point where, as you've highlighted, that leadership is not about us or the person with a leadership title. It's really about the people around them and how they enable them to be successful. Like you said, you empower, you coach, you mentor, whatever that might be. But I think it's also important that when we think of leadership as influence, rightfully, you said that it's not a title. So, I mean, if we think in the history of leadership, if you have a look at the over the last hundreds of years, there has been a place where leadership and power and that authoritarian type of leadership was very popular. And that was, they think, the way to go. And when we look at leaders today, it's totally different concept. It's about serving others. It's about that empowering transformational approach. And it's really, like you said, how do I empower others to become leaders? And again, if you think of leadership, it's not that title. So you can be a leader with no title in an organization. And I think that is so important. Also thinking of that whole concept then of self-leadership and how important that is for us in the world of work today.
Absolutely. I love that. So, I mean, and moving into, you've just come back from Las Vegas, from the LMI, which the LMI is Leadership Management International. It's an international institute that has licensees all over the world. I used to be a licensee. And just now I just facilitate when someone needs some help. So, but I know you're still a licensee, and just, in a quick 2 or 5 minutes, sort of give us what was that all about? Because I know you also won awards, right?
Yeah. Oh, that was amazing. It was really special. So, Kevin, as you've mentioned, so it was the first World Convention after COVID. So I think people were so excited just to meet everyone in person. And I think that what stood out for me was exactly like you said, it's a worldwide organization. So there were people from, I think, more than 30 countries. And what amazed me, because it was my first World Convention, what amazed me is to see the connection and the support and the just belonging, that sense of belonging from people across the world. So obviously there has been people that's been in the business for many, many years. I think there was one licensee from Australia, and he celebrated his 50th here in the business, very, very successful businessman. And then there was newer licensees like myself. So the one thing that stood out for me was that sense of belonging, that sense of we're here to help people, fulfill their potential. And that's what we have in common. So that was amazing. So we were meeting in Las Vegas, not in Vegas itself. It was about 30 minutes outside of Las Vegas in a beautiful place called the Hilton Lake. Hilton Lake Resort or something like that. And we had 3 days just sharing what is working, what are some of the challenges. And then we had some people just share that in my side of the world, this is what I'm facing. But it's amazing to see that common thread, that more so than ever, we need to focus on development, on your own development, on developing leaders and colleagues. And that was a golden theme, that now more so people want to say, okay, but let me focus on continuous learning and continuous development. So a few proud moments for us. They usually have an awards function, as you've mentioned. And Team South Africa did amazing. So this was the one, I think the most recognizable prize was we had Client of the Year. It was Crown Foods. And it was amazing to hear their story. Kevin, when Neil, sorry, for a moment, I can't remember his surname off by heart, but he's the HR director at Crown Foods. When he accepted the award, he spoke about what LMI did for him. And it was such a touching moment, because if I can share, he lost his wife during COVID. And that was also the time when they started to roll out LMI in the business. And the executive team was doing one of the journeys that we called effective personal leadership. So it's quite a personal journey, looking at yourself as a total person. Now, during that time, or just before that time, his wife passed. And it was so, so emotional just to hear how this program, this journey, supported him in finding his feet and being there to support his kids, his 2 kids, during that challenging time. And that for me was heartwarming. Yeah. So he was proud to say the Client of the Year. And then there's 2 more awards that I'll just quickly mention. So the other one is, in LMI, they have a competition. So usually they take 1 quarter of the year, and then they call it the sales championships. And they just have a look at which they take the top 3 licensees, and then they total their GP and see who's the sales champions of the year. And I'm proud to say that South Africa won gold medal. So it was myself and 3 other colleagues that got the gold medal. But Kevin, the one that was very close to my heart, and I need to give you some context around that, is that I won the Rookie of the Year. Now, it doesn't mean anything for anyone, but it really meant a lot for me. For me, it was a little bit of recognition and confirmation that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. So I don't know if you recall, but in my corporate career, I was head of HR for a big multinational. And we used to have annual awards. We called them the Oscars. And the rules was that the Exco team were not allowed to win an Oscar. We were on the panel, we selected, we handed out, but we were never allowed to win an Oscar. And I think for me, starting my own business, I never, ever envisaged that I would have an opportunity to be at a world convention and win a prize, to get that recognition. So for me, that was a very special moment.
I hear that. I mean, especially when you put the work in, you kind of go through the motions of having a business and wanting to really be intentional and really wanting to make the impact to that degree. And just when you finally get the recognition and people say, well done, well done for what it is you've done. Look at what you've done. And here is a significant reward to kind of go, we're rewarding you because what you've done is important. And I think from a human being's perspective, everybody needs it. Everybody needs that. We all have the need for significance, right? And the fact that you've been in that position, and I mean, I know that your business is still new. It's relatively new, at least. And you've really done really well in the last couple of years to really put yourself out there. And I know you're in publications, and I know you're writing for business newspapers, and so it is. It's well
doing
done.
What we love. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. And you know what I want to highlight, Kevin? I think that the importance for me is to see how my clients celebrate, because I would not have been there if it was not for my clients. And we recently, last week and now on Friday, we have some graduations for the people that has completed their LMIs. And they usually have a moment where they can share just what the program has meant for them. And last week, Friday, I was so touched because we've just completed a effective motivational leadership for part of a 3-year leadership development program. And the gents on the stage, or whether it was gents and ladies, but the one specific one that really touched my heart was he's an IT manager. So he has quite an important role in the business. And he spoke about how his confidence levels has shifted during the training. So the training was actually, how do you motivate others? How do you empower other people in your team, and understanding what motivates them or what not, and how do you coach them and not? And for me, it was so special to hear that it was not only a journey to equip him with skills to be, a better manager for them, but also how he has grown as an individual. And just that he says that now I feel confident. Something has shifted during the program. And I think that's what I love, because it's looking at you as a total human, not only the leadership side, but the other aspects of life as well.
And just to bring it back to why that works so well is, as humans, the brain loves structure and strategy. And if you like a program like the EML, it's an effective motivational leadership program. It gives you wonderful structure, but it also gives you a lot of strategies in, how your motivation should look and how it should play out within that environment. So, from a human behavior perspective, you kind of go, it works well because it is structured and there is strategy in it, right? And the brain just generally prefers when it has something to go by or has something to go on, as you know, right? It's our preference to seek out systems and patterns of what works. And the more we do that, the better, we behave, and the better results we get at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that was something that I've noticed, that people almost across the board, when they finish something, one thing that they appreciate is exactly the structure, because the programs is designed in such a way that there's multi-sensory. So you listen, you read, you do exercises, and it really enhances the learning because of that. But also, as you say, a very structured process with listen to the audio, read the material, but also do these exercises. And here are some exercises that you can take back to your team. So a very lovely structured approach. And that's what they've highlighted as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Anja, in terms of why leadership is important, I was looking at some of the importance of, what leaders, if you are a leader, you're a CEO, you're a head of your HR, you're a director of sorts, what is it that, really stands out? And, I was looking through some really important this morning, and 10 things sort of jumped out at me, and I'm just going to touch on a few of them. Very often what we, micromanagement does not work from a leadership perspective. And the very first skill that leaders need is strategic vision, and not to be in the operations, but be actually, be the visionary for what the business really, and put the right people in an operation capacity to be able to micromanage so that you can build that vision. They also mention communication, decision making, emotional intelligence, adaptability, collaboration. The one that's really stands out to me is empowerment, and that's why, I mentioned early up front that leaders create leaders. There's also coaching and mentoring, and I love the fact that it's now become a recognized need for coaches to be in an environment, and how people are actually taking on coaching roles, like an athlete would take on a coach that holds them accountable, and then the last two is integrity, ethics, and the resilience, right? And I mean, from those, which ones of those like stand out for you, and why do you think that stands out?
So can I perhaps just comment on something before I answer your question? So have a look at the 10 things that you've mentioned. And I almost want to say that majority of them, some people might call soft skills, yeah? And it's just highlighting again the importance of how essential those skills are. I mean, if you talk to things about emotional intelligence or even just integrity. And perhaps, Kevin, just another comment on the first one that you've mentioned about that strategic focus is often we see that people get appointed into leadership roles where they used to be the expert. And it's difficult for them to stand back and not be the expert anymore. And actually, as you've mentioned, empower their teams, or almost, I want to say, give a little bit of the control away. And that is a learning in itself. But when you ask me which is the important one, the one that I think is most important, it is difficult for me to choose. But I'm going to put it in the following sequence. So I think something like integrity is important. I would not say it's okay, we can put them in sequence, but integrity, simply because it is, do you do what you say you will do by when you say you will do it? And when I think of that, it builds trust, because it's about the consistency. People know that they can expect X from you. You will, behave in a specific way, and that being your word and being, aligned with what you promise, I think is critical, because it builds your reputation. It says who you are as an individual more than, the leadership role. Another one that I think is critical, simply because if you don't focus on your own resilience and making sure that you have high performance energy available to support, to think on your feet, to adapt to whatever changes is necessary, you will not be able to empower others. So I think when I think of resilience, for me, there's a lot of self-care involved, because what does resilience mean? A lot of people think resilience means grit, and it's not that. It's about bouncing back, yes, but it's actually bouncing back and be able to operate at a higher level than before. So there should be some type of learning in there. And whenever I think of resilience, I try to explain it like that. Let's say this is your baseline, yeah? So this is a state where our brain can function optimally. Now life happens, and there's stress, and there's, peaks performance and lower performance, etc. And if we want to, as individuals, operate optimally, we need to focus on basics like, what is your sleep-wake cycle? Do you get sufficient sleep? Do you exercise? Do you eat? How do you manage your negative thoughts? Are you mindful? Do you have any practices to support you to get back to this baseline state where your brain can function optimally? Because, if we are a mature leader, yes, we know how to control our emotions. It might be that we recognize our emotions, but if you perhaps not at that optimal state, but perhaps a little bit lower, it takes more energy for you to do that. And that's the challenge. So I think resilience is definitely important. And then if we say that leadership is about empowering our others, for me, coaching, mentoring, empowering definitely comes into play. But I think it's, Kevin, everything affects everything. You can't really say it's this one or it's that one, because I can talk about EQ for a whole day, and I can talk about coaching for a whole day, and mentoring, and what's the difference between the two. But yeah, I think all of them is so important.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I also do, the assessment for MIT's Neuroscience for Business, and one of the very first module they work on is that thing you mentioned now. What is your sleep intake? What does your food look like? How do you structure your day? But the very last thing that they focus on in the very first module is simplicity. And
Mm,
how do you simplify your life? How do you simplify your meetings? How do you simplify uh, what is happening in your world, right? Because,
mm,
and I think people very often have the association that because you have the title or because you are the leader, your life should be complicated and difficult, right?
mm,
And a real leadership quality really stems from how well and how focused you are on the attention management that you have of your life. Coming back to your point about your energy, right? Like, have you put the structure and the strategy in place for your life to be simplistic, so that you know that when I'm presently doing that thing in those 2 hours, that I'm here, that I'm present, that I'm alert, that I'm completely focused in the moment that I'm in, and
mm,
there's no additional sort of adding complexities to that day. And I think a lot of leaders kind of uh, they don't recognize, and they hop from one meeting to another and another and another, and then they haven't even had time to go through their emails, and then they do that at night, and you kind of
mm,
go, well, that's just basically you just don't have a handle,
mm,
or a habit of really looking after your simplicity, and really leading in a way that supports success for yourself on a daily basis. Because running at that energy, like running at that level for 6 months, you kind of go, "Ugh, I don't want to get out of bed today." So it becomes it becomes a burnout or a depression or a whatever thing and a thing and a thing. Um,
yeah. And I was
so
actually talking to one. Sorry, Kevin, please continue, then I'll comment.
No, so I'm just thinking, one of the things that I often recognize in a leadership capacity is that people don't simplify enough, and they think that complicating it makes it more substantial, when it really doesn't have to be complicated. It has to just make sense. It needs to be achievable. It needs to work. It needs to gel. And if it's simple, just do that. Do that first, and then do the next thing, right? I think simplicity is a big key factor that this list doesn't even mention.
Yeah, and I think when you spoke, there was two things that comes to mind, and the first one is perhaps just a small tip, because I had a conversation with one of my clients about that last week, and you've mentioned going from meeting to meeting to meeting, and often now, especially with a hybrid, it means sitting behind your computer, yeah, and going from one meeting to the next. So when we talk about exercise, it's not necessarily going to the gym or going for a jog or a walk this afternoon. It's, are you even mindful to take a short 10-minute break or 5-minute break? Just get up, walk, go stand in the sun before you start your next meeting. So do you have that short breaks in between? Because they say that sitting is the new smoking. And we need to be so mindful of, not to sit every day. But the other thing that I've recently worked with quite a few clients, and the concerning thing, and I think that's why I'm saying it's concerning, because it seems to be the reality for many people today, is they said that there are so many priorities that everything at work is almost like a red flag. This is important, it's urgent, we need to focus on that. That there's that they find it challenging to say, but what is the first priority, or what's the next priority that I need to focus on? And I think that's where your comment about simplicity, and let's see, if we just pause and have a look at, okay, so what is the next thing that I need to focus on in the next hour, instead of the mind going, okay, it's this and this and this and this, instead of just, not instead of, but rather just focusing. because I don't know if there's any other tip that you can give regarding that, because that's the reality that I've seen leaders sit with. They say it's so busy out there. There's too many things. I just don't know how to simplify them.
Yeah. So for me, it's always about context and content. So what is the context of the situation and what is the content of the situation? So, and each individual is very different, right? And it usually comes very, very often, I've noticed as a coach, and if you pay attention to it, you can really pick up what is this person's need as their human needs trying to feed. And very often we have the need for significance. And if I'm busy enough, and if my calendar is all over the show, and I can show you, look at my calendar, look at how busy I am, and I'm running from this meeting, and I'm going, and I'm on a plane, and I'm here, and all of that is wonderful. That you're just really busy with busyness, right? But what are you getting from it? And very often it's a sense of significance. Because as the CEO or as the managing director, like, I need to be significant, right? So your need for significance is specifically put from an external locus of control, right? And when you really rein that in and you kind of go, okay, so what if you rebalanced your significance and started finding significance in moments of quiet? And you started finding significance in moments of reading for 15 minutes. And you found significant moments for yourself in listening to a podcast that inspires you. And you change. So the meaning and the core, fundamental of the significance, right? Another human need, for example, that people often really chase after is growth, right? The need for growth. That if I'm not doing this, then I'm not growing. If I'm not doing this, then I'm not growing. But also, to your point, getting up and taking time for quiet. And the thing what people don't realize about your brain is, your brain, when your brain is so conditioned and so connected to your body, that when you're having an emotional experience, you can't go from an agitated, anxiety, fear-driven position to a really happy one. And you can't make decisions, in a clear, open-minded state if you're not actually feeling like a clear, open-minded person, right? Because your feelings directly are connected to how your decision-making processes happen, right? So when it comes to simplicity, like it literally is, what are you practically doing to create a state that supports open-minded, clear thinking? What are you actively putting in your calendar and saying, okay, stop working, go for a walk, start creating a schedule for your life. And what we now know, I mean, there's studies that support this, is it's not about time management anymore. The work and industry of neutral growth skills of the future is about attention management. How much attention can I put on this thing? How much attention is required from me? And what is my energy capacity needed for that? And when I know that, then I handle my day differently. And I just, I stop hopping from one thing to another, to another, to another. And I'm cognitive and intentional about being simplistic about my leadership approach. And I think that's where people very often get it wrong, is they feed their significance or their growth or their contribution as a human need, but they feed it from an external locus of control, and they don't find it internally.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful, Kevin. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I think it once again illustrates when you're in a leadership role, with the official title, to make sure that you, as you said, practice all these things so that others can look and say, sure, yes, that is a great example of someone that has, the balance, or that are a total person, if we use the LMI language. Yeah, so that's amazing. I think that's something that stood out for me as well, is that one of the graduates last week said, but we so proud to say that when we look at our leadership team, they are leading by example. And this, what I've learned, I can see them doing it in practice. And that's beautiful. I mean, when you hear stories like that, when you can hear the current leadership inspiring others to become those leaders as well. And I think that's when the magic starts to happen.
And also just being on a leadership program like that, also, you can't sort of do it in a day. You can't quickly go through it or do it in this week and say, okay, I'm going to catch up, right? When you go on the program and you go on an LMI program, you've got to dedicated time for a minimum of 2 to 3 months to go through a process of what this looks like.
Yeah.
And then you start eventually creating and formalizing how your leadership plays out, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's creating that structure, it's creating the strategy and simplifying it so that you can follow a process of really arriving at where you are aiming to arrive at. And I think,
sorry, please go ahead. Yeah, and I think what I just want to add to what you're saying, the reason why that is so important, that it's not a 2-day program, that it's really a journey, is because we're forming new habits. And habits doesn't form in a day or two. Yes, we can learn a new skill, but we now need to make sure that's part of how we behave or how we show up. And I think the powerful part is that for each delegate, this is something different. So that is the journey of, designing or deciding what's the habits, deciding what is it that I want to change or learn or embrace. And for me, that's the beauty of walking with a group on, you said 2-3 months, sometimes it's even longer. But to see the end result and how proud they are of what they have achieved, irrelevant what it is. Because think of building a house. Your house would be very different to my house, but we both have a dream. I mean, you spoke about that strategic visionary leadership, and that's the same for us as humans. What's your vision? What is the house that you want to build? And I think that is whenever I talk to clients, I don't necessarily want to emphasize too much what's the tools that I'm using, because I know the tools are trialed and tested and they work because they're based on neuroscience and they based on the latest research. I want them to get excited about, so what's the house that I'm building? And then I'm just supporting them to build that house.
So, I mean, I love that. And it's such it's a lovely metaphor to kind of get your brain connected to how you could do this for yourself. But I'm going to throw a whole spanner in the works here today. And as a comment on the topic of leadership, if we look at our government, for example, they represent leadership for so many people, but the representation of that leadership style and the type of leaders that we find our government, for example, showcasing to 60 million people in South Africa is so bad, right? If we could, I mean, here we're having conversations about leadership, and in business, you and I, we're speaking about the successes we've had. We're speaking about the things that we are actively doing out there in leaders, for leaders in businesses. What do you think, the overriding, because I do believe that the masses eventually start influencing and impacting to that degree. And that's what the show is really about, adding value to people's lives. If we could sort of summarize what the impact of what leadership could look like, what would you say that, are the pressing, most obvious, necessary agendas in leadership that really need to start being pushed forward from leaders in South Africa, big corporate, and really start pushing that agenda forward so that, we start shifting the narrative of the country?
That's a deep one. And it's So where do we start? Because I mean, if you look at the leaders, what is as you say, what's the example that they set? So if I think of themes, I think there's a big theme around I don't want to call it the environment, but the sustainability. So what is I almost want to say the carbon footprint. Are you focused on that topic at all? Or are we really still, having a blind eye for the impact that we as businesses and we as environment or, people, part of the state of the nation, president, etc., are we focused on that agenda? Because I do believe that we do need to focus on that. I
Yeah.
also think some of the topics that we need to, and especially for us in South Africa, and this is a personal perspective, is that we need to focus on the integrity and the transparency. And I'm not here to say what is right and what is wrong, but when we make decisions, who's front of mind? Is it the future, the kids, or the decisions that we're making, are they front of mind? Do we make the best decisions for them and their future? Or is there perhaps a little bit of a selfish focus when we make decisions? So I think
Yeah.
that with integrity and specifically transparency as well, because so often, and especially if you think of the times that we live in, no one actually knows the answers. And I think that's a different agenda that we need to push, is the collaboration, because one person alone can't make a difference. But if we collaborate and put our diverse minds together, yes, then we can get to a different place. So perhaps for me, I would say that whole environmental focus, the whole showing up with integrity and transparency, and then perhaps that collective notice. Because I can only make an impact here where I am. But what I do know is the impact that I make has a ripple effect. And so each one of us, so we might not be able to change the world, but if we as leaders of South Africa influence the community and the business where you operate, that will have a ripple effect to the rest.
And that's exactly what the point of the question, exactly to that, what you were just saying, now is we think we don't have control over the outcome. We might not have control over today, but in the next 20 years, we might have influence of how the next 20 years play out. So, and that's the challenge for leaders out there. I want to pose to having this leadership conversation and knowing that all the wonderful things that we've just spoken about, that once you as a leader make it your and own it and kind of go, I want in this business of my 200 or 2,000 employees, I want them to thrive. I want them to really go out there and make a difference to their lives and really make a difference to that degree. When you simply just take that as an approach and, to some of the points you mentioned, and start applying how to be more actively aware of who are you in this environment? How do you show up in this environment? And what difference can you make to the 5 and 10 people you're working around you today? Suddenly, when we do that on in every other building in South Africa, we start changing the narrative. And I think that's the importance of what leadership really, really, really needs to do, because inevitably that will change our lives, our country.
Yeah. And what comes to mind is that word, the beautiful word that we often use in South Africa, Ubuntu. And if I remember correctly, I think it is, I'm seeing you, and through seeing you, you develop or you become what you can be. And I think that summarizes what you say, is that when a leader really focus on the team that they're responsible for and make them feel seen and heard and respected in order to thrive, that person can impact the next generation and the next generation. Yeah, and I think that's where the power is.
Yes, I think there's another slogan to it. I am because you are.
Yeah.
Ubuntu. So yes, guys, thank you, Anja. Thank you for the conversation today. That was absolutely beautiful. I think we should actively go out and to your point, Anja, really start living out the Ubuntu and bring it back to every day, bring it back to conversations, bring it back to realizations, bring it back to training sessions and coaching sessions and everything we do, because at the end of the day, the only ones that make a difference is the ones that want to, right? And that apply themselves. So any closing words from you, from your side, Anja?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about something that is so close to my heart. The whole concept of leadership, irrelevant if you have a title or not. And my last thought for the listeners would just be is to give yourself grace. You have amazing potential. Go dream and make the difference you choose to make.
Yay, fantastic. I love it. Anja van Beek, guys, she's the human talent centered strategist, executive coach, agile people advocate, and HR and leadership expert. If you want to check it out, you can find her definitely on LinkedIn. You can just type in Anja van Beek, and you can chat to her. And you maybe if you need her help, you can go and see her. Anja, thank you so much for chatting, and I will see you soon. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks. Thank you, Kevin. You too. Take care.